Good morning, Zimbabwe and the surrounding nations around the world, and welcome once again to Good Morning Zimbabwe. My name is Kina Strongwata, and thank you so much for tuning in. Once again, we are here with the Prophet of God, Prophet Tom Tirivangani, and we are here to discuss the nation of Zimbabwe as God continues to give him insight on the nation. So once again, we would like to welcome you, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, and it's always a pleasure to be here.
It is a pleasure to have you, sir, and thank you so much for joining us today. And our faithful viewers, as you continue to watch, remember to share your comments, spread this message with your families and friends, and help us to spread this broadcast as we continue to discuss some essential aspect in Africa and also in the nation of Zimbabwe. So today, man of God, our first question, we want to discuss the recent interview that we saw between the President of the United States and the President of South Africa. So what is your view on that, sir?
Thank you so much. I would like to say that I'm very much interested in leadership, and I am a student of leadership, and therefore I study leadership and I watch things that go around the world. And therefore, the interview between Donald Trump, the president of the United States of America, and Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, was no exception. So I was very keen, and I made an effort to watch the interview. And well, to a great extent, I felt a little bit disturbed by a number of issues. The first thing is that it was without a shadow of doubt that the president of South Africa, although he was able to maintain his composure throughout the interview, was not prepared for the interview. It is as if his leadership around him was not really equipped to handle that kind of a meeting and make the kind of response that was necessary. Now, I believe that the interview exposed the deficit of leadership in Africa and Africa's obsession with appeasement politics and compromise rather than speak the truth. Cyril Ramaphosa did not defend his country, did not defend the African population that have been victims of apartheid for over decades. There were many people that were massacred in South Africa during the apartheid era, the abuse that the South African population went through, and their extension of the end of reconciliation after 1994. Really, the comments of Donald Trump was a slap in the face of the South African population who have endured racism, abuse, and landlessness for decades, whose land was robbed by a white minority government that was illegal and very abrasive in its approach to dealing with the local population. Many indigenous South African communities were displaced in favor of the 7% minority white population in the country. Now, the whole idea about Donald Trump's comment that there's genocide in Africa was not a mistake. It is the whole racial mentality of the white global north vis-a-vis its politics in Africa. It was not an accident. It was a grand scheme of the lies the narratives that were always pushed to make Africa look bad, so that the West can take advantage of Africa. Now, in 1884, there is what is called the Scramble for Africa, the Berlin Conference, in which Africa was partitioned into different certain states. What preceded that conference was obviously a grand lie that was perpetrated by the West towards Africa, that Africa needed civilization, that Africa was a dark continent, that the whole idea of the imperialist project was meant to civilize a dark continent. And the abuse that the African people went through for decades is heartrending. I am an author of a book called Land and Social Justice, Land Law and Land Reform, Social Justice, a case for Zimbabwe, in which I really deal with the issue of land and the historical imbalances and the great and grand theft that was initiated by the colonial and imperial project against the indigenous African people. So to see and hear Donald Trump talking about a certain group of people, the Boers, the white African, who were the architects of apartheid, who abused South Africans for many years, was really insulting to any right-thinking African. We are practicing the politics of compromise at the expense of the integrity of the African continent. So I found Cyril Ramaphosa's comment that South Africa is a crime-laden country very insulting to his own people. I mean, we saw the white entourage of Cyril Ramaphosa begging South Africa, begging the United States of America to deal with the issue of crime in the country. That was not the purpose of the meeting. The purpose of the meeting was to address this issue. Is there genocide in South Africa or not? There isn't. It's a complete lie, a complete insult. How could the United States of America, with such high level of intelligence, then allow their president to put up those stories, those pictures that are completely false, and create a false narrative on an international media? That was bad. That was bad. That was really, really insulting. And not only insulting to Africans, but insulting to the general United States population. That their president was acting in that fashion in front of international media. For me, it was disturbing.
Thank you so much, man of God, for giving us your view on that interview. So in the light of Zimbabwe and the leadership, how do we connect the two?
The African leadership ought to change the paradigm and deal with this monumental problem of corruption, misgovernance, and nepotism, tribalism, playing to the global north, Galilee, always trying to abuse the global north at the expense of the integrity of the African population, the African continent. I believe we are beginning to see a different narrative emerging, especially in the Sahel countries. There, Burkina Faso is a good example, where their young president, Ibrahim Traore, is standing up to the global north and refusing and rejecting this colossal lie and perpetrated by the North about Africa. Really, it's a debate that is long overdue. In 1984, Professor Walter Rodin wrote a book called How Europe Developed Africa. This Guyanese professor, and they gunned him down, basically. They kill anybody who stands up and expose their hypocrisy. So for me, this is the global bullying of the North versus the South, and the hypocrisy of the global North, that they want to sell wrong narratives about Africa so that they can continue to have justification to plunder and loot African resources. And Zimbabwean leadership has been doing exactly the same, abusing its local population, playing to the gallery of the West, and dealing completely, to a large extent, nothing tangible for its suffering local population. And I think that it's time for Zimbabweans and Africans in general to wake up, wake up and realize that it's not the North that can build up Africa and Zimbabwe, but that it is a responsibility of the African people to take charge of their destiny. And the church plays a very fundamental role in this conceptualization of issues, and it has always been. When you look at the Bible, prophets like Amos were men who demanded justice. He says, let justice roll down like waters. Jeremiah confronted the establishment of his day, the same with Isaiah, and all the prophets we see in the Old Testament. So the church has a very important role to play in ensuring that they hold the Zimbabwean government to account. So not just merely criticizing them, but actually holding them to account and ensuring that they are accountable for whatever they are doing. But we can't do that as a church if we are sitting and eating at the table of the government. We can't do that if we become part of their cabinet. We can't do that if we sing for a supper. We can't do that like what I see many African pastors are doing. They love to take pictures with African presidents and then post it on their social media to give them some kind of maybe some kind of a recommendation that this is who I am, and so forth and so forth. But I believe that the church has a serious responsibility to hold the government to account and ensuring that the Zimbabwean government stop the corruption. Zimbabwe is endowed with many mineral wealth. Its land resources is a grand wealth. The land, fertile land. Zimbabwe used to be the bread basket of Africa and produce and feed Africa and the world. Zimbabwe has gold. Zimbabwe has uranium. Zimbabwe has platinum. Zimbabwe has diamond. Zimbabwe has so many, so much potential, but it's the misgovernance, the corruption, and the nepotism, and the many nefarious activities that are being done by the government that really has and obscured Zimbabwe's future. But I think it's time, within the context here of this kind of a thing that you see, the meeting between Trump and Ramaphosa, it's time. It is time to stop the insults against the African people. It's time to stop the false narratives about Africa. And Africa have to defend itself. But they cannot defend themselves if they are divided, Africa have to take a common collective approach. Africa has to ensure it has one common currency. Africa needs not to be this many states. Africa needs to be a global a continent with one state, with unity, cohesion in terms of its voice. Africa needs to collectively unite its economies and ensure that they have one strong economy with one strong currency. And the future then of Africa could be redeemed that way.
All right, thank you so much, man of God. We are continuing to hear as the viewers as you continue to share your comments. And remember, we said that to share this message with your families and friends. We're going to take a quick break and we will come back. And this is Good Morning Zimbabwe.
Explore Law, Land Reform and Social Justice, A Case for Zimbabwe by Tom Tirivangani. The land question in Zimbabwe has generated a lot of heated controversy all over the world. It is also useful to lecturers and students involved in studying the subject of land reform. It is perhaps the first book that attempts to make a serious analysis of landlessness as a human rights issue. Get your copy today on Amazon.ca.
Welcome back to Good Morning Zimbabwe. We continue our discussion with the servant of God, Prophet Tom Tirivangani, as he continues to talk about the state of Zimbabwe and the continent of Africa. So once again, we are going to allow the servant of God to continue. So, man of God, thank you so much for giving your view on that latest meeting with the president, because it does affect how the other surrounding country looked at that as a country, as the continent of Africa. So, man of God, what is your takeaway today for the nation of Zimbabwe?
I probably want to take two big important issues in our closing. Number one, I want to talk to the Zimbabwean youth. And I want to say to them, without a shadow of doubt, God has given the future of Zimbabwe into their hands. And that they are the guarantors and the underwriters of Zimbabwe's future. And that they must not lose confidence in that, but that they must be confident enough to really move and demand that they should be part of the whole project about creating a future Zimbabwe, the one that we are saying Good Morning Zimbabwe. So the current leadership of Zimbabwe were youth who left colleges, high schools, elementary schools, jobs, in order for them to go in and fight and usher in an era of freedom. When they realized that the racist Smith regime in Zimbabwe had crushed the general population of Zimbabwe, and they did so and did so successfully. So they can do, the current youth can do the same and demand their freedom and a portion of the country's future, as they are the guarantors and the underwriters of Zimbabwe's future. I think that the second aspect is that I think that the Zimbabwean church need to wake up. And especially the Zimbabwean leaders, Zimbabwean bishops, Zimbabwean apostles, evangelists, they should wake up to this realization that the small picture they are projecting is not what God wants. They have a greater responsibility because the church is the moral voice in any nation. And that they must not compromise, they must not be afraid, but they must stand up, number one, to make their government accountable. But it starts by making sure that the church is thoroughly sanctified and sanitized, that church leadership stands up to something that is visible and that is commendable. And therefore, once they have done that, then they are able to make the government account and save the population that is suffering. That's their responsibility as the guardian of the spiritual atmosphere in any nation. So look at Jeremiah, look at Isaiah, look at Amos, look at them. the role they played in ensuring that Israel's political atmosphere was decluttered of corruption and idolatry. Zimbabwe need to do the same, especially the church in Zimbabwe.
All right, thank you so much, man of God. And this is Good Morning Zimbabwe. And viewers, we thank you so much for tuning in. Remember, every Sunday, 4 p.m., we have a sit down with the prophet of God where he continues to give the prophetic insights for the nation. So thank you so much for tuning in today, and we have come to an end.